November 17, 1944, Kummersdorf, 30 miles south of Berlin. Dr. Heinrich Kieperth, a German engineer, stood in the cold morning air and watched as German technicians unloaded an American tank destroyer from a flat rail car. The captured vehicle had arrived under heavy guard and was marked top intelligence priority. Kieperth had been waiting 3 weeks for this moment. The Americans called it the M18 Hellcat. German troops in France had nicknamed it the Devil Hunter because of how quickly it struck and disappeared. At first glance, the Hellcat did not look impressive. It was smaller than German tank destroyers. Its armor was visibly thin, barely enough to stop heavy machine gun fire, and its open-top turret seemed dangerously exposed. But Kieperth knew appearances could be deceiving. This particular M18 had been captured near Metz on November 2. Its crew had abandoned it when they ran out of fuel during a quick advance. The Germans reclaimed the vehicle before the Americans could destroy it. The Hellcat carried battle damage, bullet holes in its thin armor, a track damaged by a mine, but its engine ran and its gun worked. Over the next 48 hours, Kieperth and his engineering team would put the captured American vehicle through the most thorough tests any German engineers had done on enemy armor. They measured every dimension, examined every component, fired the main gun, and most frightening to German test drivers, pushed the Hellcat to speeds that made them uncomfortable. What they discovered would challenge everything built on German ideas about armored warfare. When Kieperth filed his report to the Army Weapons Office on November 24, his conclusion was unmistakable. German industry was losing the arms race. The production capacity shown by this single American vehicle far outstripped German industrial output. The report was stamped top secret and distributed to fewer than 30 officials before the Third Reich began to collapse around them. In April 1945, American forces recovered that report from a Berlin basement where Wehrmacht files were hurriedly stored. Today, Kieperth's account gives rare insight into how late German military leaders realized the truth. They were facing an enemy whose industrial power made German victory mathematically impossible. Dr. Heinrich Kieperth was one of Germany's most respected automotive engineers. Born in Stuttgart in 1902, he studied mechanical engineering at the Technical University of Berlin and graduated in 1926. By 1933, he had become chief engineer at Daimler-Benz and worked on both civilian cars and military vehicles. As Germany began rearmament in the mid-1930s, his expertise in vehicle design became invaluable. Kieperth worked on almost every important German armored vehicle design from the Panzer III through the Tiger II. He understood tank design at a fundamental level that few others did. By November 1944, Kieperth was the chief technical advisor at the Army Weapons Office, responsible for evaluating captured enemy equipment and advising German vehicle development. He and his team tested dozens of Allied tanks, British, Soviet, and American, using a strict, repeatable protocol. Measure every dimension and weight, strip and inspect engine and transmission, test suspension and running gear, fire the main armament, evaluate armor protection, and assess overall design philosophy. The goal was to spot weaknesses to exploit and strengths that could be copied. When he learned an intact M18 Hellcat was available, Kieperth immediately understood its significance. Reports from Normandy and later fighting mentioned American tank destroyers more and more. German tank commanders described them as unbelievably fast. They would appear suddenly, fire, and vanish before German guns could respond. Intelligence from France suggested the M18 could reach speeds over 80 kilometers per hour, faster than any tracked German armored vehicle on the battlefield. What Kieperth and his team would learn from that captured Hellcat helped make clear a painful truth for German leadership. They were fighting an enemy whose industrial and production power was beginning to decide the outcome of the war. German armor doctrine was built around heavily armored vehicles that dominated through firepower and protection. That doctrine left no framework for understanding how a lightly armored vehicle like the American M18 Hellcat could be effective. For German tank destroyers, the priority was always armor thickness and gun power. The Jagdpanther, Germany's main tank destroyer, weighed 46 tons, carried the powerful 88mm gun, and had 80mm of thick front armor. It was essentially a fortress on tracks, designed to fight enemy armor from prepared positions at long range. But it was also slow, complicated, expensive, and consumed huge resources. By late 1944, Germany could only build about 40 Jagdpanthers per month. The M18 Hellcat represented an entirely different philosophy. Instead of armor, it relied on speed. Instead of protection, it relied on agility. Instead of standing and fighting, it struck quickly and retreated. And most importantly, it represented mass production instead of craftsmanship. On November 17 at 800 hours, Dr. Kieperth began his measurements. The Hellcat weighed 17.7 metric tons, less than half the weight of a Jagdpanther, according to the Kummersdorf weighbridge. Its size was compact, 5.28 meters long, 3 meters wide, and 2.57 meters tall. But what shocked Kieperth most was the power-to-weight ratio. The Hellcat's Wright R975 radial engine produced 400 horsepower. That worked out to 22.6 horsepower per ton. By comparison, Jagdpanther, 13 HP per ton. Panther tank, 12.8 HP per ton. Tiger tank, only 10.3 HP per ton. The Hellcat's ratio was nearly double Germany's best tanks. That explained its reported speed, but it also revealed something deeper about American design philosophy. The Americans had deliberately sacrificed armor protection for mobility. German doctrine had always dismissed this trade-off as unacceptable. Kieperth now wondered if German doctrine itself was flawed. The engine impressed him even more. The Wright R975 was a 9-cylinder, air-cooled radial, originally designed for aircraft. German engineers had experimented with radials for armored vehicles, but never adopted them. All German tanks used liquid-cooled inline or V-type engines. Kieperth ordered the engine removed for full testing. Disassembly took 12 hours, and what they found challenged German assumptions about automotive engineering. The design was beautifully simple, 9 cylinders arranged around a central crankshaft in a radial pattern. Air cooling eliminated the need for radiators, pumps, or coolant systems. That saved weight, reduced maintenance, and removed vulnerabilities. A single bullet through a German tank's cooling system could disable it. The same bullet against the right radial might disable one cylinder, but the other 8 kept running. The construction also showed extensive use of aluminum, unlike German engines, which relied mostly on steel and cast iron. Aluminum was lighter but required advanced metallurgy and manufacturing techniques. Clearly, the Americans had both. Most importantly, the Hellcat's engine showed mass production quality that German industry simply could not match. Every part was made to precise, interchangeable dimensions, requiring no hand fitting. Assembly marks suggested the engine could be built in just 8 hours. A comparable German engine took 30–40 hours to assemble. Kieperth calculated that while a German factory produced one engine, an American plant could turn out 4 or 5. And that was just the engine. The transmission revealed even more about America's industrial edge. The M18 used a Torquematic automatic transmission developed by General Motors. For German armored vehicles, automatic transmissions were almost unknown. German tanks used manual gearboxes with synchromesh gears, requiring highly skilled drivers to operate effectively. The Torquematic, by contrast, was a hydraulic automatic with 3 forward gears. The driver simply moved a selector lever and pressed the accelerator. The transmission shifted automatically, based on speed and load. This was not just an engineering difference. It was a glimpse into a different industrial culture, one that prioritized simplicity, standardization, and mass production over complexity and craftsmanship. Kieperth then drove the Hellcat himself to test the transmission. His first note was one of surprise. The vehicle accelerated smoothly without the driver having to shift gears. The driver could focus completely on steering and aiming, not on clutch operation or gear selection. For a tank destroyer, a vehicle that depends on quick movement and rapid response, this was a huge advantage. Beyond tactics, the automatic transmission revealed something deeper about American production. Automatic gearboxes are more complex than manual ones. They need precise hydraulic parts, refined seals, and careful assembly. Yet the Americans were willing to fit such a complex transmission into a vehicle that might be destroyed in months. That choice showed an industrial capacity Germany did not have. German engineers were still struggling to build reliable, simple manual transmissions for their tanks. The Americans used an automatic weapon in a vehicle made to be expendable, and they could mass-produce it. The suspension test provided another insight. The M18 used torsion bar suspension, the same basic system German tanks used, but the American implementation was different. German torsion bars were heavy, built to carry cumbersome armor. The Hellcat's torsion bars were light, designed for a much lighter vehicle. Wheel travel was 14 inches, letting the Hellcat keep high speed over rough ground without throwing tracks. Kieperth took the Hellcat over Kummersdorf's test course with obstacles, slopes, and rough terrain. The Hellcat beat German expectations at every test. Engineers measured a top speed of 88.5 km/h on level ground. The German test driver, Panzer veteran Schreiber, had refused at first to drive so fast, fearing the vehicle would run wild. Kieperth ordered him to try. Schreiber later reported the Hellcat was stable and responsive at 80 km/h. The American suspension absorbed shocks that would have damaged German vehicles. Cross-country speed was 42 km/h, roughly double what German tank destroyers could manage. Climbing ability was exceptional. The Hellcat climbed a 35-degree slope with no trouble. Acceleration from 0 to 30 km/h took 6 seconds. A Jagdpanther needed 14 seconds for the same sprint. The Hellcat's main weakness in mobility tests was ground pressure. Its narrow tracks produced a high ground pressure of 10.5 psi, which reduced performance in mud or deep snow compared with broader-track German vehicles. Still, the mobility advantage was overwhelming. On November 18, the weapons tests began. The M18 carried a 76 mm 1A1 gun, the same gun used in later Sherman variants. German intelligence already had data on that gun from captured Shermans. In most battle ranges, the 76 performed well against German armor, though it was not as powerful at penetrating as the German 88 at long range. But Kieperth noticed a feature others missed. The Hellcat's turret traverse was extraordinary. Its hydraulic traverse system could rotate the turret 360 degrees in 24 seconds. German tank destroyer turrets, when they had turrets, were much slower. A Jagdpanther's turret took 70 seconds for a full rotation. That difference mattered. In battle, the first shot often decides the outcome. A vehicle that can acquire a target quickly and then shift to a new target has a huge edge. The Hellcat could attack, fire, and move to another target faster than German vehicles could react. On November 19, Kieperth fired the captured M18 76 gun with captured American ammunition. The gun proved accurate, reliable, and consistent. What impressed him most, however, was the fire control setup. The M18 used a mix of telescopic sights and periscopes that gave the commander excellent battlefield awareness. The commander could spot targets while the gunner was busy engaging another target. That allowed fast target acquisition and continuous engagement. German vehicles often limited the commander's view and forced the crew to focus sequentially on a single target. Recoil control was excellent too. The gun's recoil system absorbed firing shock without upsetting the chassis. Even on a light frame, the gun fired steadily. It was clear that the Americans had invested serious engineering effort to make the small chassis carry an effective gun. Then, on November 20, German armor testing exposed the Hellcat's most important weakness, and at the same time, its deepest lesson. The hull armor ranged from 13 to 25, very thin compared to German standards. The open-top turret and light hull would not stop much heavy machine gun or cannon fire. Against a German 88, the Hellcat would be vulnerable at most ranges. But the tests also proved the American design choice. Mobility and speed were the protection. The Hellcat wasn't meant to slug it out frontally with heavily armored opponents. Instead, it used speed to avoid being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It struck quickly, shot, and moved before the enemy could bring heavier guns to bear. Its superior power-to-weight ratio, automatic transmission, fast turret, and excellent sights let it do that repeatedly. Most telling of all was the production method. Kieperth found parts made to exact, interchangeable dimensions that needed no hand fitting. Engines could be assembled in about 8 hours instead of the 30–40 hours German engines needed. American factories could produce multiple engines in the time a German plant made one. The use of aluminum, stamped parts, and standardized assemblies showed a manufacturing system designed for mass output. For Kieperth, the test results spelled a hard truth. In the long run, industrial power and the American approach to design, favoring mobility, standardization, and mass production, were overwhelming German craftsmanship-based doctrine. The Hellcat's thin armor was a deliberate trade-off supported by logistics and production that Germany could not match. In short, the Hellcat taught the Germans that mobility, quick aiming, rapid firing, and mass production could defeat heavier, slower, more protected vehicles on a modern battlefield. It was not just a new machine. It was evidence that German armored theory needed to change, and Germany no longer had the industrial space or time to do it. The turret armor of the Hellcat was only 25 at its thickest point. That wasn't even enough to stop a .50 caliber machine gun at close range. A German 20 anti-aircraft gun could pierce it from any distance. Even rifle grenades could knock it out. By German standards, the M18 Hellcat wasn't really a tank destroyer. It was more like a self-propelled gun mounted on a lightly armored chassis. The armor was so thin that calling it protection was misleading. It was basically just enough metal to hold the vehicle together and stop small arms fire. But Kniprath noticed something important. This wasn't a design flaw. The Americans had chosen this on purpose. Thin armor meant less weight. Less weight meant higher speed. Higher speed meant survival by avoiding hits instead of taking them. Their design philosophy was simple. It's better not to get hit than to survive a hit. To German thinking, this was foolish. For them, armor was essential. Without heavy armor, a vehicle was vulnerable to almost every weapon on the battlefield. German crews would never agree to fight in something as lightly protected as the Hellcat. Yet Kniprath found a surprising fact in reports from France. Despite its thin armor, M18 crews suffered fewer casualties than German tank destroyer crews. The Americans were surviving in vehicles that the Germans considered death traps. This meant one of two things, or maybe both. American tactics with tank destroyers were superior, or mobility was more valuable for survival than German doctrine admitted. On November 21, Kniprath compiled his findings into a report and presented them at Kummersdorf to other engineers. Representatives from major German manufacturers, Daimler-Benz, MAN, Henschel, and Porsche, attended. He highlighted the Hellcat's key features: extremely high power-to-weight ratio, unmatched mobility, an automatic transmission that reduced the driver's workload and training needs, an air-cooled engine that was easy to maintain and very reliable, a hydraulic turret that allowed quick target aiming, and finally, a deliberate trade-off, giving up armor for speed and mass production. Kniprath pointed out that this wasn't just engineering, it was a different philosophy. If you're fascinated by how engineering choices and strategy shaped armored warfare in World War II, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We bring you the hidden stories of how technology and tactics changed the course of battles. After Kniprath's presentation, the German engineers debated fiercely. The older generation, trained in the tradition of heavy, high-quality engineering, dismissed the Hellcat as crude and reckless. Oberingenieur Franz Kempf of Henschel argued it sacrificed everything for speed. With armor so thin, he said, it couldn't survive real combat. To him, it wasn't true engineering, it was desperation. But younger engineers saw something else. Porsche's junior designer, Klaus von Richter, pointed out, "The Americans built over 2,000 of these. We've built fewer than 300 Jag Panthers. Their crude vehicle is winning because for every one of ours, they have 20. Kniprath steered the discussion away from ideology and back to production. He showed how the Hellcat was designed from the start for mass production. Every detail reflected this: welded armor instead of interlocking plates, stamped parts instead of machined ones, bolt-on modules for easy replacement, and a modular design that allowed quick repairs. In contrast, German tank destroyers were built like precision instruments. Each component required heavy manual fitting. Armor plates were carefully shaped and welded. Engines and transmissions were hand-assembled and tested individually. The result was superb vehicles, but they took too long and too many resources to build. Kniprath then revealed the production numbers that made his point undeniable. Between July 1943 and October 1944, the U.S. built 2,500 M18 Hellcats, about 166 per month. Germany, from January to November 1944, built only about 360 Jag Panthers, just 33 per month. In the same tactical role, American production outpaced Germany by a factor of 5. The comparison became even more alarming when Kniprath expanded his analysis to all American armored production. In 1944 alone, U.S. factories produced about 17,700 tanks and tank destroyers. German factories, by contrast, managed only about 9,000 armored vehicles of all types. At the very moment Germany was locked in a two-front war, America was outproducing them 2-1. When the engineers in the meeting absorbed these numbers, the room fell silent. Then Oberingenieur Walter Spielberger asked the question everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. If American production is so much higher than ours, how can we possibly win this war? Kniprath's answer was careful but brutally clear. We can't, not through armored warfare. The Americans can replace their losses faster than we can inflict them. For every one of our vehicles, they can field 5. Even if our machines are superior, sheer numbers will overwhelm us. At a secret meeting in Kummersdorf in November 1944, this was the conclusion Germany's senior leadership refused to admit publicly. The war was already lost. America's industrial power made German defeat inevitable. The only question left was how long Germany could delay the outcome. On November 22, Kniprath returned to his detailed analysis of the Hellcat, pointing out features that revealed a larger truth about American military capability. Its electrical system used a 24-volt design with rubber-insulated wiring and waterproof connections, far more reliable than the 12-volt systems in German vehicles. The cruise stations were arranged for efficiency, with controls placed for easy access. Every instrument was clearly labeled in English with simple graphics. It was designed so that even soldiers with minimal training could operate it. German vehicles assumed highly trained crews who could handle complexity. American vehicles assumed crews might have limited training, and so the controls had to be simple and intuitive. Maintenance was also far easier. Removing the Hellcat's engine required disconnecting just 6 major points and could be done in under 2 hours. A comparable German vehicle took an entire day. Clearly, The Americans designed their machines for field repairs by crews with only basic mechanical skills. Ammunition storage was also practical, 45 rounds of 76 shells stored in racks for quick access. German designs often placed ammunition in hard-to-reach locations, slowing reload times. Every detail of the Hellcat's design reflected systematic thinking about how ordinary soldiers would fight in real battlefield conditions. German designs reflected engineering ideals, machines built for perfect conditions and expert operators. On November 23, Kniprath conducted the most revealing test of all. He assembled a group of German tankers who had fought American forces in France and asked them to operate the captured Hellcat in tactical exercises at the Kummersdorf training grounds. The drills simulated typical tank destroyer missions: rapid movement into firing positions, engaging targets at different ranges, and quick displacement to avoid counterfire. The results were stunning. The German crews adapted to the Hellcat in just 2 hours. Within 4 hours, they were performing better in it than they did in their own vehicles. The automatic transmission eliminated driver mistakes. The fast turret traverse allowed them to engage targets quickly. The excellent visibility gave commanders superior awareness of the battlefield. At the end of the exercise, Kniprath asked the tankers for their opinion. Veteran driver Schreiber spoke for the group. "This vehicle is better than anything we have. It is faster, more reliable, easier to use, and more effective in combat. The thin armor concerns us, but the mobility makes up for it. If we had the choice, we would rather fight in this than in a Jag Panther." This testimony was damning. German soldiers preferred the enemy's equipment to their own. Kniprath included this bold evaluation in his final report, knowing it would spark controversy. On November 24, he submitted the official report to Herr Swaffing. The document was 37 pages long, full of technical drawings, photos, and test results. But the conclusion was short and devastatingly clear. Kniprath wrote, "The American M18 tank destroyer represents a design philosophy completely different from ours. We prioritize armor and firepower. The Americans prioritize speed and mass production. At first glance, their approach seems flawed, trading survival for mobility. But detailed testing shows the opposite. The M18 is built for mass production, ease of operation, and battlefield effectiveness. Most importantly, American industry can produce so many of these vehicles that German technical superiority becomes meaningless." He added, "The M18 demonstrates several American advantages. Their industrial power overwhelms German production in ways no engineering improvement can fix. Their factories can quickly build even complex machines. Their design favors practicality over perfection. Simple controls and crew efficiency make up for weaker armor. Most worrying of all, American soldiers using the M18 achieve better results in battle than our troops using supposedly superior German tanks. This exposes deep problems in our armored doctrine, problems engineering alone cannot solve." The report ended with recommendations Kniprath knew would never be accepted. Germany should shift immediately from quality to quantity. Tank designs should be simplified for faster production. Armor should be reduced to allow greater speed. Automatic transmissions should be adopted to cut down training time. And above all, German leaders had to face the truth. You cannot defeat an enemy with overwhelming resources through tactics or technology alone. The report was classified top secret and distributed to only 28 people, including senior officers of the Army High Command and top weapons directors. Reactions were mixed. Some officers admitted Kniprath was right. Inspector General of Armored Troops Heinz Guderian said the report confirmed what he had been arguing for months. Germany needed more good-enough tanks instead of fewer, perfect ones. But most dismissed Kniprath's conclusions. They argued German engineering would always win, that one German tank was worth 5 American tanks, and that adopting inferior designs would insult German military tradition. This denial of reality defined German leadership throughout the war. Faced with Allied superiority in production, logistics, and technology, they clung to myths of German spirit and engineering excellence. As Germany collapsed, Kniprath's report was filed away and nearly forgotten. But it survived. In April 1945, as U.S. forces pushed into central Germany, the 2nd Armored Division captured Kummersdorf. Intelligence officers uncovered extensive files in the testing facility offices, including Kniprath's report on the M18. The report was translated and sent to Aberdeen for study. American engineers were impressed by how thoroughly the Germans had analyzed the Hellcat and how accurately they understood its strengths and weaknesses. Their reaction validated Kniprath's findings. Yes, the M18 was lightly armored. Yes, it couldn't withstand a direct hit from German guns, but its speed, ease of production, and effectiveness in combat made it one of the most successful armored vehicles of the entire war. The American design approach that German engineers once dismissed as crude actually proved correct. After the war, U.S. intelligence officers who were curious about German versus American armor design questioned Kieperth. Transcripts of those interviews, released in 1974, reveal his striking conclusions. He told his interviewers, "When I first tested the M18, I thought it was a joke. The armor was laughable. The gun was adequate but not exceptional. Compared with German vehicles, everything about it seemed crude. But as I studied it more carefully, I realized the Americans had solved a problem we never admitted. You built a vehicle that could be produced quickly, driven by minimally trained crews, maintained in the field, and used effectively in combat. We built vehicles that required long production times, highly trained crews, depot-level maintenance, and careful hand-fitting. Your vehicles were good enough to win. Ours were too perfect to survive." Kieperth explained why Germany never adopted the same design choices. German engineering culture prized perfection. They were trained to build the best possible product regardless of cost or complexity. That made sense in peacetime, when resources were plentiful and quality mattered most. But in wartime, especially against a richer industrial rival, perfection becomes the enemy of adequacy. When Germany finally needed mass production, it was still producing masterpieces. By the time they realized the problem, it was too late. American industry had already gained advantages that Germany could not match. Kieperth's post-war career reflected this change in thinking. He returned to Daimler-Benz and argued for simpler designs that emphasized reliability and manufacturability over engineering showpieces. His influence helped steer the West German automobile industry after the war toward designs known both for quality and for practical, efficient production. If you're fascinated by how engineering and industrial power shaped the outcome of World War II, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. These are the stories that explain how winners are really made. Now, what the Hellcat revealed about the wider industrial war. The M18 tested at Kummersdorf was more than a single clever vehicle. It was proof of American industrial integration that Germany could not duplicate. Every component of the Hellcat told a story about U.S. production power. Consider the engine. Among the 57,658 engines produced during the war, the Wright R975 radial in the Hellcat was one of many mass-produced units. Originally an aircraft engine, it had been adapted for ground vehicles and manufactured at rates that outpaced total German armored engine production. The Torquematic automatic transmission was produced on GM assembly lines that churned out hundreds per week, something Germany had no comparable capacity for. The 76mm gun was built in 4 different factories using fully interchangeable parts, meaning a gun from Factory A could be mounted on a vehicle made in Factory B without hand fitting. German guns often required handwork even when built in the same plant. Using automated processes, the U.S. made shells in dozens of plants nationwide, millions per month. Germany, with a smaller industrial base and shrinking resources, struggled to supply enough ammunition. Every bearing, wire, seal, and stamped part on the Hellcat reflected industrial capabilities Germany could observe but not copy at scale. The tracks used synthetic rubber made from petroleum feedstocks. Germany had developed synthetic rubber, but never on the scale the U.S. achieved. By 1944, American synthetic rubber production exceeded 1 million tons per year. Aluminum parts required huge amounts of electric power to smelt. American aluminum production was driven by purpose-built hydroelectric dams for war production. Germany's power grid barely met civilian needs. Standardization and logistics thinking showed through everywhere. Every M18 used the same parts. A transmission removed from vehicle number 1 fit perfectly into vehicle number 500. Interchangeability simplified supply lines and field repairs. German vehicles often used non-standard parts, even within the same production batch. Mechanics had to keep long lists of spare parts and sometimes even make custom pieces just to repair them. Kieperth admitted that these production details mattered more than any single technical feature. The real question wasn't whether the Hellcat was better in battle than the Jagdpanther. The real question was whether 2,500 Hellcats were more effective than 300 Jagdpanthers. The answer was obvious. By late 1944, German intelligence had gathered huge amounts of data on U.S. industrial output. The numbers told a clear story of overwhelming American strength. In 1944 alone, American factories built 17,700 tanks and tank destroyers, 96,270 aircraft, 66,700 landing craft, 2,710 Liberty ships, hundreds of other vessels, 41 billion rounds of ammunition, 2.6 million trucks and jeeps, and billions of dollars worth of other military equipment. Germany's production in the same year was far smaller: 9,000 armored vehicles, fewer than 40,000 aircraft, almost no naval construction, not enough ammunition, and about 350,000 trucks and transport vehicles. Across all categories, the U.S. was outproducing Germany by factors of 2 to 1 up to 10 to 1. And America did this while fighting a two-ocean war, while Germany was under attack on 3 fronts. The Hellcat symbolized this American industrial power. In just 15 months, 2,500 identical, reliable, and effective vehicles rolled off the assembly line. Germany could not match this output for even a single type of vehicle. For German engineers and officers, the psychological impact was heavy. Kieperth's report was simply the official confirmation of what many already knew. Germany had lost the industrial war years earlier. Since 1943, its battles have only delayed the inevitable. Every Sherman, Hellcat, and fighter plane that left an American factory pushed Germany closer to defeat. For German engineers who tested it, the captured Hellcat at Kummersdorf became a symbol of everything their country had done wrong in preparing for the war. Germany focused on technical perfection, while America focused on mass production. Germany built weapons that required highly skilled operators, while America built weapons that ordinary soldiers could use. Germany was designed for ideal conditions, while America was designed for the messy reality of the battlefield. Most importantly, Germany believed that superior engineering could overcome material disadvantages. The Hellcat proved that belief false. In December 1944, as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, the Hellcat was moved from Kummersdorf to a secure storage site. It survived the war and was captured by British forces in May 1945. Later, it was returned to the United States and added to the Army's collection of unusual captured vehicles. For decades, it sat in storage at Aberdeen Proving Ground, one of many dusty war trophies. In 1998, its historical importance was finally recognized. This was the very vehicle that had led to Kieperth's damning report. It was restored, and is now on display at the National Armor and Cavalry Museum at Fort Benning, Georgia. Visitors can still see the German markings painted on it when it was captured, the measurement points where German engineers recorded every dimension, and even some of the battle damage it had before capture. What most visitors don't realize is that they are looking at the vehicle that helped German engineers understand they had already lost the war. Dr. Heinrich Kieperth survived the war and returned to Daimler-Benz, where he worked again as an automotive engineer. He rarely spoke about his wartime work, seeing it as a period of national tragedy. But in a 1976 interview with a German military history journal, Dr. Heinrich Kieperth reflected on the Hellcat examination with remarkable clarity. "I knew on November 17, 1944, he recalled, when I first saw that American tank destroyer, that Germany would lose the war. Not because the vehicle was superior to ours in every respect, but because it was good enough, and they could build it in quantities we couldn't imagine. That was the moment I understood that engineering excellence without industrial capacity is useless. We had designed perfect vehicles for a war we couldn't win." The lessons Kieperth drew from that captured Hellcat remain relevant even today. Industrial capacity matters more than individual weapon superiority. Production design is as important as design for performance. Quantity has a quality all its own. As Stalin reportedly said, practical effectiveness beats theoretical perfection. And most importantly, understanding your enemy's capabilities realistically is essential, even when that understanding reveals uncomfortable truths about your own limitations. The M18 Hellcat was never the best tank destroyer of World War II by German standards. It wasn't the most heavily armored, the most powerfully armed, or the most technically sophisticated. But it was produced in numbers sufficient to achieve tactical objectives. It was simple enough that crews trained quickly could operate it effectively. It was reliable enough to maintain in the field, and it was good enough to help win the war. That was the lesson German engineers learned too late, at Kummersdorf proving ground in November 1944. That was the reality Kieperth documented in his report, and it was a reality the German military leadership refused to accept until Soviet and American forces met in the ruins of Berlin. The mad rush of American production, showcased in vehicles like the Hellcat, ultimately decided World War II more surely than any single battle or tactical innovation. Germany fought with excellence. America fought with abundance. In total war, abundance wins. The captured Hellcat tested by German engineers proved this beyond doubt. Their admission, recorded in Kieperth's report, stands as one of the most remarkable pieces of military analysis from the war. An enemy engineer, examining captured equipment, concluding with scientific certainty that his nation had already lost. That took intellectual honesty and courage, qualities few possessed in Nazi Germany in 1944. Kieperth deserves recognition not just for his technical expertise, but for his willingness to document reality, even when that reality meant acknowledging defeat.